What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Conflicts of Interest. This is episode 150. I'm the host of the show, Kyle Anslone. I have a really special interview today. I'm talking to Scott Horton. He's the editorial director of antiwar.com, the founder of the Libertarian Institute, the author of 3 books, including The Great Ron Paul, Enough Already, and the one we're focusing on today, Fool's Errand, Time to End the War in Afghanistan. Is one of the just best books to have on the Afghan War. Scott's really the best expert on foreign policy in the libertarian movement and one of the just greatest American thinkers on the Afghan War. And so we're going to get into it today. We're going to break it all down and talk about what's been happening in Afghanistan, add in the historical context, and talk about, what Scott thinks may be some of the, future of Afghanistan as far as potential U.S. intervention or, what the Taliban reign may look like. So be sure to share today's show. I think it's one of the most important shows that we have had here so far on Conflicts of Interest. You find it at the Libertarian Institute, libertarianinstitute.org/Kyle, for a full archive of my work, including the daily news roundup that I write. You can find the show on YouTube, Odyssey, or Rumble. You can follow the show on any of our social media accounts, Facebook, MeWe, and Twitter. The Twitter handle is at @con_interest. You can support the show, help us, to grow, promote the show, get better equipment and technology. And you could do that by, giving us money at Patreon or Subscribestar, or by getting your CBD products through Paloma Verde. Paloma Verde has some of the best CBD products on the market. They have their lab test results right there on the website, and such a wide variety of different CBD products to choose from. They even have stuff for your dog. I really like their topicals. I use their sports cream almost every day. The bottle lasts for a really long time, so that's one great thing. In the past, I use the stuff you get at Walgreens, the BioFreeze, the Icy Hots, and I would go through them really quickly, and they get kind of expensive. I actually get more bang for my buck shopping with the CBD products at Paloma Verde. So use the promo code PEACE, PEACE, when you check out. That gets you 25% off when you spend $75 or more. And here's the interview with Scott Horton. Hey Scott, how's it going today?
Great, man. How are you, Kyle?
Doing good. Kind of excited to have you back on the show, but at the same time, it's been a whirlwind the past couple of days, and it's in Afghanistan where you are one of the, really experts on that war and what happened. So, I got you on the show, and I had to plan the interview actually a week ago, so I didn't think we would be talking about the fall of Kabul on the show, but here we are. Now that is actually where I want to start off, though, because on the show, the last show, me and Will were talking about how we really didn't think anybody expected to, for Kabul to fall so fast. And then right after we got done recording, I listened to you talking to Danny Davis, where both of you guys said, well, yeah, it is possible for the Taliban to walk right into Kabul. And so it seems like, at least you guys had the foresight to speculate that it was a possibility for this thing to fall apart. I mean, just a couple weeks ago, we had the Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, saying, and this is going to come back on him unbelievably, that Kabul won't fall from a Friday till a Monday. But that's what happened. So I guess what factors did you see in Afghanistan that made you think it was at least possible to have, unfold the past couple of weeks, which have unfolded, which is the entire country fell to the Taliban?
Yeah. Well, in fact, on page 209 of the book Fool's Errand, I say the same thing. It's very likely that they could take over Kabul in relatively short order as soon as America leaves. The Kabul government cannot stand without our support. And, I probably wrote that a year or two before that. It took me forever to get that book done. But anyway, yeah. What can you say? The first thing is that the Kabul government was simply fiction put on by the West. It could never stand on its own. And the country of Afghanistan never had the GDP to support that government or its military whatsoever. The entire thing was kind of foisted on them. And then for many different reasons, the Afghan National Army has always essentially been, a put-up job that also, was paper thin and would fall without American support at a moment's notice, which is what's happened. And so, and there's just no popular support. Never mind the money. There's the government in the North never had popular sovereignty as representing the will of the people. These were the people who were put together by the Americans. And back in history, in 1994 through 1996, the way the Taliban took over the country was mostly by walking right in, telling the local warlords essentially, join us or die, and then, but you can join us if you want. And so they would join, and they pretty much took the whole country that way, or almost all of it, including Kabul. And in 1996, they just walked right into Kabul. And so, this is something that, from the anti-war perspective, is something that we've been grappling with for a very long time. It's 20 years into this war. This is something we've been talking about for years and years and years, for more than a decade, is what's it going to look like when America finally leaves? And the answer is the government will fall, and the Taliban, sooner or later, will take back over the country. And that's been clear at least the last 10 years. And frankly, if they had left instead of doing the Obama surge, the Taliban was a major force in the country at that time, but relative in its power compared to the factions that America had installed in the north of the country, it was much weaker. And, if there was a way that they were going to have a negotiated peace where the American-backed sides don't just completely lose, then it would have been to do it back then. Instead, they waited and waited and waited. They refused to negotiate with the Taliban without including the Kabul government in the negotiations, which, of course, is a deal killer because they don't want a deal. They want the Americans to stay and protect them, right? And so, for years, Bush and Obama, they just refused to make a deal. And so then essentially they stayed long enough. They propped up the government long enough, but without real support. I mean, most of all American combat operations have ceased since about 2014. They've been backing the Afghan National Army on its missions, which are, quite limited. And so while they've backed the Kabul government there, they haven't really helped establish it in power in any firmer way than it was before. And in fact, they've sat and slowly watched the Taliban creepingly take over the entire country. And as I say in the book, and which again was 4 years ago, and I was basing this on reporting from the Wall Street Journal and others, and from the Special Inspector General, John Sopko, that the Taliban ruled half the country in the daytime and about 65% of it at night. And there was this lady named Ashley Jackson who wrote a thing. I can't remember now. I think this came out after my book, because I'm pretty sure I didn't include it in my book. But it was about how after the Americans killed the previous Mullah Mansour in a drone strike, that the new guy, Haqqanzadeh, was a much more diplomatic type of guy, or at least a more clever strategist, and that he decided that rather than, and I hope I'm putting this right, I don't think she was saying Mansour decided this. I think she was saying this was decided after Mansour by Haqqanzadeh. I could be wrong about that. Maybe it was after Mullah Omar died. But either way, in our current era, the Taliban strategy has been not to just wage total war against everything that the Americans have built, but instead to take it over. And so if the Americans build a school, don't blow it up. Just you decide who gets to be the principal of the school and who gets to be teachers there. And if there's the Americans build a new police station and an armory, that's fine. Just make sure that your guy becomes the police chief. And if they set up this, the Western style of governorship under Kabul's authority, fine. Just make sure you control the guy that's the governor. Instead of just assassinating him, take his chair under the American system and just usurp as much of the they already have kind of their shadow government in the background. Go ahead and usurp the government that the Americans have installed over them as well. And Jackson also talks in there about how they were inviting Tajiks and Uzbeks and even Hazaras, who are Shiites, into their Islamic emirate. They don't call themselves the Taliban. They're the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan to them,
Right.
and so that doesn't say no Shiites allowed necessarily, although I don't know what's going to happen with the Hazaras. That's a whole other question. But at least they have been clever enough, dealing from essentially a position of weakness in their own country, to to build up to a position of strength through compromise and through subtlety, and not just trying to be a sledgehammer against everyone. And so then, leading up to now the peace deal, where we have had a ceasefire with them since 2018, and they've been chipping away at the Afghan army even harder than before because the Americans aren't there to help them as much, although there's still some air support, and this has been some air support in this kind of thing. Essentially, by the time it was ready for the withdrawal, I don't know what the signal was. Was it when they gave up Kandahar airfield? And then that was when somebody pulled the starting gun and said, all right, everybody go outside and take over your local town and military base. And they just had their guys spread. The shadow government of the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan came out in the daytime and said, this is ours now. And, what they had not done before. They've been, they flipped the light switch and went from insurgency to new state. And they were ready to go. And I was just talking about, Eric Margulies was saying, it's, he was praising my French. It's a coup de main, not a coup d'etat, but a coup de main, which is a massive surprise attack that wins all at once. And so, I think it's somewhat implied in there with relatively light casualties, but maybe not. But so that's what happened. And, Kyle, for all the complaining that this is just an absolute catastrophe, well, it is for the people that America's propped up in power. It is for the reputations of the Americans who have made it this way. And yet, as far as the Taliban taking over the country, you notice that they're kind of acting as though the Taliban have been behaving like ISIS and just going around, machine gunning people and, committing these massive atrocities as they take over the country, the way ISIS did in Western Iraq in 2014. But it doesn't look like that, not yet. I mean, they are brutal and ruthless, and so who knows exactly what they're going to do. Maybe the show trials will begin in a few weeks or something. But so far, they seem to have made a public relations decision, at least, to play it cool and essentially try to maintain the peace and try to build a reputation of, see, we're not so bad for the people of Kabul and for the international community and everyone else. That, despite what you heard about us, we're actually going to try to get along with you and you, if not you, right? I don't know.
Right.
So, now, again, I'm not saying like this is a great, a mark of the quality of their character in any wonderful and positive way. But, there's a difference between ruthless and stupid. And it could be that they're making the very rational decision to, for example, they have stuck by the ceasefire agreement with the Americans and allowed everybody safe passage out of the country from the embassy to the airport. And, I was talking with an Army guy about how, they're really worried this is going to be like Black Hawk Down. All our guys are going to be getting machine gunned and mortared, and they're going to have to send in, special operations guys or air power to blast the living hell out of everything around and all this. None of that happened. Mm-hmm. And for that matter, it's not even clear at this point that the panic of the civilians at the airport is even justified. Unless the Taliban issue nobody else is allowed to leave anymore order, but they don't seem to be doing that. They seem to be saying, you want to get on a plane and leave the country, be my guest kind of attitude. Yeah. I don't know if they've addressed that specifically. I should go check the Taliban Twitter feed. I wish you could translate that whole page all at once instead of having to translate each tweet one at a time. But anyway,
well, Scott,
go ahead.
I want to really ask you about what you thought about the Taliban and their rule, because if you look at U.S. Western media, they're certainly portraying it as this is going to go back to Afghanistan in 2000, 2001, where I think there were like public executions of women for trivial offenses of, Islamic law that, me and you would never consider actual offenses of anything anyways. And
Yeah.
so, I mean, it could be a horrific situation. At the same time, I don't know how many people who are members and active like leadership of the Taliban in 2001 are still alive today in 2021. I'm guessing it's not that many. Mullah Omar is dead, and several of his successors have been killed in the meantime. If you look at the Taliban fighters and some of the footage I've seen of them, a lot of them look young, certainly not older than me. So that means they were likely born, after 9/11 or around, the start of the war. Some of them have smartphones. The CNN lady, Clarissa Ward, I think is her name, was like in downtown Kabul. She had on a black burqa, but like her face was all exposed. She was wearing a lot of makeup. They were friendly with her. Then when she got closer to the presidential palace, they weren't like as, friendly with her. And, obviously this is like a white woman down there in a black burqa. Like, they understood the PR that she was trying to spin, and they just told her to stand aside. It's not like, they said, get the hell out of my country or anything like that. So,
Right.
I don't want to say, and I certainly understand if I were living in Afghanistan and I were like some lady who signed up for a U.S. NGO and I've been like pushing women's education and, or, trying to be like a female journalist or something like that. I don't know if I would chance it with the Taliban, but it doesn't necessarily mean either that the Taliban are going to be horrible people. And there is like an international spectrum that we're okay with. Maybe they'll just be a little bit better than the Saudis towards their women. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on, what the Taliban might look like this time that they're in charge.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's obviously really way too soon to say, but I gotta give you credit. I mean, I just interviewed Eric Margulies, and he said exactly what you said. Mullah Omar and his guys are dead. It's 20 years later. A lot of these guys are much younger, and their attitudes almost certainly are not as harsh on some of this stuff. As you say, it's the 21st century. These guys are your age. They only know the 21st century. And even in Afghanistan, it's not the old days, So now they could be absolutely ruthless and decide that, they've made a decision that from now on, every woman better cover every single part of her face, or else they'll stone you for witchcraft or God knows what. I don't know, man. They could decide that. So far, they haven't behaved that way. And in fact, I'm following a couple of good journalists who were there, like Matthew Akins and Bette Dam. I don't think she's there, but she's retweeting a lot of great journalists who are there and stuff. And they showed little boys and girls going to school. And the Taliban have said, everybody go back to normal. And we're not closing, nothing's closed. We're not changing anything, at least so far. And they said, and this is in the New York Times. And the New York Times like, whoa, what do we make of this? That a female Tolo News reporter, anchor, interviewed a Taliban spokesman without her face covered or anything like that. She had a head covering on, but
her hair was
he
exposed
a
a little
show.
bit though too, which I
I'm
think
sorry?
her hair was exposed a little bit too, which I think is significant. She was dressed like a woman who would be like in downtown Tehran. She wasn't even dressed like she would, be in Riyadh or something like that.
Yeah, like it wasn't all black. It was a colorful, pretty kind of gown or whatever kind of thing, right? Yeah. And then so I'm fairly certain I have my story straight. Sounds like you know it better than me, but I think it was in that interview that he was saying we encourage women, or maybe this was separate, I forget, but we encourage women to participate in life just like before, including joining the government and helping administer the government. And it says so in the Quran that that's how it's supposed to be. And so, I don't know if that's how it's going to go from now on, but that's certainly a positive sign. And I'll tell you what, I learned this from Anand Gopal, and he really knows it from doing, so much in-depth reporting over there for years, that as, well, I'll get back to that in a second. But, the Taliban's interpretation of Hanafi rights, Sunni Islam, is always extremely austere and conservative on the far end of that spectrum, whatever direction you would think of that. But they're a few clicks to the left of the ancient Pashtun-Wali code that far predates Islam, and in a lot of cases is really the most probably sexist tribal code of conduct or whatever that you would call it in the world, at least currently. And so in other words, and as Gopal writes, on the most important issue, property ownership, can a woman inherit and own and buy and sell property? And the answer, according to the Taliban, is yes. And that's overruling the Pashtun-Wali code that would have it where, they're relegated to more like a third-class citizen status or worse, So at least under the Taliban, they can own property, which is, as libertarians, we understand is step one of liberty, is being able to own a house and own a piece of land and improve it and trade it and whatever like that. So, so that's something. And then, also the Pashtuns are not predominant in Kabul, which is the most important city in the country right now. They are predominant in Kandahar city, and they'll have a very easy time of it ruling Kandahar city, I'm pretty sure. But in Kabul, unless they want to have, and maybe they don't give a damn, but unless they want to have, a real violent conflict and crackdown and real trouble ruling that city, they're going to have to compromise a bit on how other people are and how much that city has changed in the last 20 years. And so, they could be really bad. I don't want to play it down anyway, or I don't want anyone to get the impression I'm playing down. Well, I guess what I'm saying is that they're conservatives, not radicals, right? So they got some pretty right-wing views, but that doesn't make them the Khmer Rouge, and it doesn't make them ISIS, turning all of Western Iraq upside down. At least so far, their PR is, we are here to establish law and order. Everything is fine. Right. There is no crisis. See what a crisis there's not? That's so far their public relations. So, may they stick with that. I mean, why screw that up, right? If all of the power in the whole damn country just fell right in their hands. So what are they going to do? Completely blow it? I mean, maybe, but I don't know. They sure have an incentive to kind of play it right. In fact, I'm sure you saw the statement of Baradar, who's kind of the de facto new leader for now until the other bosses get back from Qatar. But he was saying, wow, this all happened even faster than we could have ever thought. And so we ought to take a minute to be grateful to Allah and kind of cool our heels and stop and think and figure out what we're going to do here without acting like jerks. I'm paraphrasing very roughly, you understand. But that was essentially what he was saying. And in fact, it must have been Bill Roggio from the Foundation for Defense of Democracies a few weeks ago, like maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago, Kyle, had published a thing that was like instructions from Haqqani Jr. I forgot. Jalaluddin Haqqani is the old dead one. Oh, it's Sirajuddin or something. Haqqani is the son. And he's kind of like an adjunct here with the Taliban, kind of joined their forces together. And he had issued these standing orders to Taliban fighters in the field regarding the taking over of army bases. And it was all essentially along these lines. Play it real cool. Treat all the soldiers with respect. Take their rifles and send them home. Don't do anything stupid. The whole world is watching us, kind of thing. That was the narrative. I should find that and write about that, because blog it somewhere or something, because I had actually forgotten about that until just now. But, this was like, the standing order was, don't be an asshole. Everything is going our way. Which, hey, again, for the Taliban, it sounds like the American cops could learn a lesson from them.
Right.
At this point,
And who knows? Like, as you say, it's too early to call, and this could just be PR. I mean, the Taliban could have figured out that Western media attention is pretty short, so if they could play it cool for 6 months and, put some women on billboards and have them be doctors or something like that, that should get the, media at least not condemning you too hard. And then in 6 months, you could, as long as you keep it on the, DL a little bit, go back to your old ruthless ways. But at the same time, at least there seem to be the right way now, are looking at a better direction now. One of the things I want to talk about with you and try to get your perspective on is just the withdrawal and what the hell happened, Scott. Because I mean, the scenes of people like trying to cling on to airplanes flying out of the country, it seems like it being a disaster to this scale could have been preventable. I've seen the mainstream media really start to target Jake Sullivan as being the national security advisor, and it would his role to not allow this to happen, which is interesting that more on him than Blinken or Austin, the Secretary of State and Secretary of Defense. So I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts on how the Biden administration handled this, and exactly, I guess I would think if I were Biden and I had decided to get out of Afghanistan, my instructions would be no, don't make it easy for them to compare this to the fall of Saigon. Like, we don't want the comparisons with the Vietnam War. And you actually had that. Now, I mean, they've been helicoptering people out of the embassy for years, I guess. But at the same time, maybe you set up one convoy to get everybody out or something, so you don't have those photos for the media. You don't have people trying to cling to planes and falling off of them at 100 feet. So that, and I got your article up here for anybody watching the show right now that or no, I don't, because it didn't load. But you have a new article out today at antiwar.com on Afghanistan. But go ahead.
Yeah. Well, again, there could have been a massive slaughter of the guys trying to flee the embassy and get to the airport. When people say the fall of Saigon, and look, this is before I was born, but I have read about this, and I'm fairly certain, and I've seen documentary footage of it, so I'm fairly certain that, the fall of Saigon meant that NVA and the Viet Cong, their Viet Cong allies, sacking the city, machine guns ablazing, all over the place, and Americans, holding them off and dying trying to hold them off, while people are escaping, barely trying to hang on to the skids of the helicopter and this kind of crap. This, again, is not like that. The Taliban, they had a ceasefire deal, and they stuck to it and said, we're going to have this peaceful transfer of power where we get what we want and you guys leave, meaning the previous government. And then I don't even think they said the Americans need to leave. I think the Americans they fled the embassy because they were afraid of the worst. And so helicopter's one thing, but helicopter in an absolute life or death situation on the way out the door that's the ultimate catastrophe. And that's the way it's being spun, right? Again, it's being spun like it's Khmer Rouge have taken over the North. I mean, hell, even when the North Vietnamese took over Saigon, they didn't slaughter everybody, but it was a battle as they took it over. At least there was fighting, so anyway, they should have, well, first of all, they should have admitted to themselves that the Afghan National Army is not holding on here. They're already giving up bases. We ought to plan for the worst. And we ought to go ahead, and even if they're lying and saying, oh, we think Kabul can stand for 90 days, they should be planning to get everybody out the day after tomorrow. And, instead they're saying, no, we're going to keep this massive embassy with, I forgot how many employees, 1,000 employees and 3,000 troops to protect them or something like that, or 300 troops to protect them. I forgot what the hell it was.
There's thousands of employees and 650 troops, and even 650, and even this past, I think yesterday, I saw a statement put out from the U.S. saying that there were thousands of American civilians still in Afghanistan that they were trying to get out of the country. So it seems like they had a lot of people there. I guess some of them were probably contractors or working for NGOs or something like that. But yeah, a lot of Americans, they still had no idea how they were going to evacuate, it seems.
Right. But yet now, as far as the scenes at the airport, I mean, where were the 650 troops to say everybody get the hell off the runway? That kind of failure of security is actually like a minor thing, but it just makes a stupid scene on TV. People chasing a plane down the runway. What the fuck is the point of that? What are they doing? And still, like, okay, you want to get the hell out of the country, but how much machine gun fire do you hear in the background? Like, are you sure you have to make this flight or die? Or maybe you could just wait and catch the next one. It seems like, from what I saw, there's a few days worth of planefuls of people, right? Maybe less. An airport can move a lot of people. I don't know.
Should be able to, at least. Now, one thing I noticed, though, that the morning that people are clinging to the plane, there was also some footage of Americans loading their military dogs onto the plane. And so I'm not sure, maybe the people were like more saying like, you're not taking your dogs out of here before us or something. Like, I don't know if they were chasing the plane that was full of people, or if they were chasing a plane that was like full of military gear, maybe like, who knows? The Afghan central bank, as far as like a couple weeks ago, I think they said had like $8 billion. I'm sure they're interested in making sure that money doesn't go right into the hands of the Taliban. Right. So who knows what's on these planes? I guess that was part of the reason I thought people might be chasing it. But if it is full of Afghan people, chasing it down the runway is kind of hindering you getting out of the country if you're not on that plane.
Yeah, seriously. Like, look, we all know they can only take so many people, all right? So wait for the next one. You didn't make this one. Get the hell out of the way. I don't know.
And then I don't know if you read the story from the Afghan central bank head and his I
did read the tweet storm thing
that he put out, where he said that he got on his plane and there's like 300 people on it and no pilot and no fuel. And so maybe that kind of panic, just people thought that this was going to be the last plane out of the country or something. But
I think they imagined that the Taliban is nipping right at their heels. As soon as they get here, they're going to start shooting us all.
Right.
But then that didn't happen, right? Here we are. It's a few days, 2-3 days later now, and that wasn't what happened. So I think they can all chill out now.
Right. Well, and isn't it kind of interesting, Scott, that you have Western reporters in Kabul, and things seem nobody's getting shot. Like, right. Some people are going about their business. There's traffic, stuff like that. But then you look at the Kabul airport, the one place in Afghanistan that's seems not to be under Taliban control at this point. It's the most chaotic and potentially deadly part of Afghanistan yesterday was the airport. And just kind of an interesting observation there of where the chaos is and where the death is happening and who's in control.
Yeah, exactly right. I think they presume a lot. And then they act based on, how they think things are going to be instead of based on the reality of the situation.
Yeah.
And, frankly, like, you could have some ISIS guys show up and do some suicide bombings at the airport right now that the Taliban would have tried to prevent if they could and cause all kinds of chaos. Or maybe you have a disagreement among the Taliban and they decide to, start hunting for, wanted men among the crowds or whatever. I don't know. Right. But so far that hadn't been the case. As far as I know, I've been trying to keep up as of late this morning, at least.
Yeah, I haven't seen any of that either. I wanted to ask you about ISIS in Afghanistan for a couple reasons. What the hell happened to them? Because they were a force that were fighting the Taliban. And I guess to bring up here the safe haven myth too, which I'm seeing a lot of hot spin up now in reaction saying that, oh, look, the jihadists are going to come back to Afghanistan. But Scott, it was less than a year ago, and you always point this out, that the special forces were acting, and I think kind of, tongue-in-cheek calling themselves the Taliban Air Force.
Yep, and I linked to it in today's piece at antiwar.com, too, that Washington Post story. The Joint Special Operations Command flying drones in support of the Taliban against ISIS, which is the answer to your first question. The Taliban killed them all, or almost all of them. I mean, I guess, probably didn't kill every one of them. And there have been attacks, including the attack on the Hazara schoolgirls that took place, 6 weeks ago or 2 months ago, where the Taliban said, we didn't do that, man. That was those guys that did that. So, I guess they're not all the way gone yet. But and frankly, I don't know who they are. They're probably just mostly old disaffected factions of the Taliban, guys that got kicked out of it, and said,
Right.
okay, well, we're going to join up with this group of Pakistani Taliban exiles here, and there may be some Chechens and whatever. But I got to tell you, man. So I'm always talking about this guy. It's Bill Roggio and Thomas Jocelyn at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. I'll always follow them. They're very detail oriented for hawks and focused on the terror war stuff. And I think Roggio's the kind of guy who you would see him quoted as the expert on this. He's the one who's telling you, and that's how you know it's true. But then on his Twitter feed there, he says, listen, we know that Al-Qaeda is still in the country because it says so in these UN reports. And I'm like, what? That's really all you got? Like, I thought he was going to say something. The first half of that sentence, I was like, all right, finally someone's going to demonstrate to me that there's some friends of Osama and Ayman al-Zawahiri running around in Afghanistan somewhere. Show me some Arabs. And that's what you got? Is the UN reports? But I've read the UN reports. And the UN reports say, member states inform us. Intelligence agencies say that. And then that is it. There's no evidence whatsoever. The only Arab I've heard of having anything to do with any of this was they said an Egyptian Al-Qaeda PR guy was killed back a few months ago. But then, okay, where's his cell? Where's the follow-up? And who counts? And if you read closely in the stories about Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan, almost always they skip right to Lashkar-e-Taiba, and then as they try to call it, and who knows if anybody on their side ever called this at all, but the Americans call it Al-Qaeda in the Indian subcontinent. Oh, really, huh? In other words, fighters for Kashmir in the dispute between Pakistan and India are supposedly in Afghanistan. And I'm supposed to consider that, what, a threat to American civil aviation? Give me a break, dude. These people, I'll tell you what, Kyle, back in 2009, when Stanley McChrystal wrote his report about why we have to do the surge, Lindsey Graham had to remind him, hey, you should say in there that there's Al-Qaeda guys in Afghanistan that we're fighting. And McChrystal went, oh, whoops. Man, I forgot to put that in there. That's the reason. Oh, I mean, of course we're fighting Al-Qaeda. Yeah, Al-Qaeda. They're the guys we're fighting. After all, everybody knows that. After Lindsey Graham told him, geez, your report would read a lot better if you pretended that there were some suicide hijacker, friends of Osama running around there somewhere. And then the same thing for Bruce Rydell, the former CIA officer, who's been great on Yemen. Thanks for that, Bruce. But, he supported the surge and wrote his big report in the spring of 2009. And in order to claim that there were Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan, he had to conflate them with Lashkar-e-Taiba fighting in Kashmir and say, well, the Afghan Taliban have relations with them. Oh, I guess Roggio was also saying that, it says in the UN report that the Haqqanis are still friends with Al-Qaeda. And that's what makes the Taliban friends with Al-Qaeda, because the Haqqanis are, and now the Haqqanis are back friends with the Taliban again. Okay, well, that's a narrative that you can fit in a couple sentences, but it's not demonstrated whatsoever that that's true. It's also not demonstrated that the Taliban would be stupid enough now to let a bunch of foreign Arab international terrorists use their country that they just finished successfully taking back over again as a base to attack Western targets and get all of their army divisions carpet bombed off the face of the earth again. So, remains to be seen whether they can keep a deal any better than the Americans can. But
Right.
They made a deal that they would not allow that to happen. And the fact that Bill Roggio can only cite the UN reports, I was disappointed. I've been really looking forward to some Al-Qaeda and Afghanistan propaganda of any substance here to grapple with lately, but that's all, unfortunately.
Well, you would think they would be able to like photograph some guy who was in the, moved there as the Mujahideen, married some Afghan women, and retired from the fight and went back or something, like, find somebody with some connection, and they don't even seem to have that. I
Nope.
want to ask you about China, because this is one of the other things that especially the Republican, even some libertarians, will say is, but if we leave Afghanistan, here comes China, and that they're gonna get all these minerals, and it's gonna be so great for China. And then as a part of that too, I was interested because when I saw China meet with the Taliban, it seemed like one of their major concerns wasn't even the minerals or anything like that. Their main concern was the Uyghurs who hang out in Afghanistan, and they told the Taliban that they want them to cut ties with the Uyghurs. And so
Mhm.
I'm just curious, this would be, I guess, another example of the Taliban, not really looking to have these overall sympathies with Muslim jihadist groups against world superpowers, and rather just, to have everybody in Afghanistan minding their own business and staying the hell out of, China and America's business, maybe. So I'm interested what you think.
Yeah, of course. I mean, look. Oh no. Okay, let's take the scaremongers hype at face value here. Oh no, if we leave, then China will go there. And then what? Finish the sentence. I demand it. Right? Then what? The reality is America doesn't have a single national interest in Afghanistan of any measure whatsoever for China to threaten. What difference does it make to America if China conquers the whole country? They send 500 million people to colonize the whole place. What difference does it make to us then? The answer is absolutely nothing. The same answer to what have we gotten out of 20 years of war there? Nothing. And so, I saw somebody sent me a tweet this morning of Iraq War vet 88 pundit or whatever saying, now the Taliban and China together are going to take over the world. Yeah. Oh, I'm so afraid. I mean, notice the people who are the biggest on the hype on this, they don't even know who's who over there at all, right? So, if anything, America is going to be allying with the Taliban against China rather than the Taliban allying with the Chinese against us. And what the Chinese are complaining about there is this group, the East Turkmenistan Islamic Movement, ETIM or ETIM, and which the Americans bombed them along with the Taliban together back in 2018. And the military called them terrorists. The military and the CIA don't always agree eye to eye on who's a terrorist, Kyle.
The U.S. had them on the terrorist list at one point. I think Trump took them off. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, exactly right. If that isn't tipping their hand a little bit, why not just lie? It's covert action anyway, right? Why take them off the damn list? They're crazy. Anyway, so listen, I mean, this is a thing, and I just talked with Eric Margulies about this, about America supported the Pakistani ISI training Uyghurs in Afghanistan and in Kashmir, he said, in the 1990s or late 1990s and very early 2000s. He saw them in Afghanistan in the summer of 2001. And so then some of those guys were the same ones who were rounded up and tortured in Guantanamo, must be. And then some of them were let go, but according to Seymour Hersh, and there are other sources for this too, I forget them all. I need to go and line them all up in my head. But I know Hersh wrote about this, that there were something like 20,000 Uyghur fighters who went to fight on the CIA and Al-Qaeda's side in the Syrian war. And so then there's a major question of what is happened to all of these guys and where have they gone? And I can't remember, was it Peter Lee who wrote about, maybe it was Peter Lee who wrote about how they're being kept safe in Uzbekistan right now by American allies, kind of in reserve. I need to go back and get my cards straight on all of this, man.
And within the past year, I read that there were some still in Idlib, in Syria, that I guess are kind of stuck there. I'm not sure if like Turkey is helping them.
Yeah, they had their own little town for a while, right?
Yeah, I think that part of Idlib was taken back though. I think they got pushed, and they're just like And who knows, Turkey could have, I guess, helped to, move them back, because Turkey has a lot of influence in Central Asia, and I
Right.
think with the Uyghurs. And so, it may be, some of their involvement there. And they're looking also to strike deals with the Taliban. Interesting, Scott, how, one of the big threats from the U.S. in the past couple of weeks is, if the Taliban take everything by force and don't sign a deal, then they're not going to have any international recognition and no international legitimacy. And here, the Russians are keeping their embassy open. They're fine with it. The Iranians seem fine with it. They have their long, deep ties with the Pakistanis. The Chinese seem more willing to talk to them. Our NATO allies, Turkey, are willing to talk and want to, keep security at the Kabul airport. So it doesn't seem like that's going to be that big of an issue for the Taliban.
Yeah. And look, remember, we're the ones who switched sides in the war. The Russians are only finally switching sides now, as they have no choice at all. The Russians have supported our effort there this whole time. And the only reason they and the Iranians have begun talking to the Taliban is because they could see years ago now, Kyle, and we're having this conversation in 2021, and the American people are only just started paying attention again for a moment or whatever. But years ago now, it was clear that America had lost the war and the Taliban had won it. And if they're going to have relations with whoever's ruling Afghanistan, they need to get to it. And especially in the case of the Russians, they wanted to side with the Taliban as a hedge against ISIS. And their original bet, to be perfectly clear, was that America and the Afghan National Army was their first line of defense against ISIS. But the Americans weren't defeating them. And so they said, hey, Taliban, this is, again, the Taliban are conservatives, not radicals. And the Russians say, look, kill these radicals, man. Stand between us and these radicals. And so the Taliban said, sure. That was the only kernel of truth in, stupid Charlie Savage's propaganda about the Russian bounties and all of that a year ago, was that, yeah, the Russians have been paying the Taliban, not to kill Americans, you filthy liar, but just because they're trying to have an open relationship with them to protect their own interests. It's as simple as that. And so, you're right that they're fine with it and that the Americans' ostracism of it and all that isn't holding. But believe me, that's by far their second choice, to have to settle for the Taliban. That's not who they would prefer to see in power in Kabul at all. I'm almost certain.
Right.
Well, I am certain.
Right. And I guess the same goes for India as well, who had
Right.
pretty deep
Absolutely.
ties with the former Kabul government. I guess before we wrap up here, Scott, tough question. I asked it to Danny a couple weeks ago, and that is the Afghan, Danny Sturgeon, that is the Afghan war actually ending? It seems pretty clear that the U.S. doesn't have a choice at this point about ending the occupation. But there's a war going on in Somalia, and there's no U.S. troops there. So, Scott, do you think like a year from now, if I have you back on the show, we'll say that there's not like an ongoing U.S. war in Afghanistan?
That's a great question. I mean, I got to tell you, the Somalia is a hell of a lot easier to get to than Afghanistan. And unless the Russians are providing us, leaning on the Uzbeks or the Tajiks to provide us bases there for the northern route, I don't know what they're going to do. Some airstrikes with, I guess I'll put it this way. Yes, as long as there's an armed insurgency on the ground in the Panjshir Valley or whatever up there in the north, I guess you'd expect the Americans to try to back them. Although I don't think that's going to last very long, honestly. But if there is armed insurgency over the long haul and continuing civil war, then yes, I would expect the CIA to be backing certain sides of that, and probably the worst sides rather than the least worst. But as far as like a permanent drone war against Al-Qaeda and all that, I mean, they just don't exist there, right? Like in Somalia, they're defining Al-Qaeda so broadly that it includes Al-Shabaab, right? So they could do that. They could start defining the Taliban as Al-Qaeda again, and saying, oh, they're just terrorists. And anti-terrorism includes bombing the Taliban. But when Biden says anti-terrorism, he doesn't mean bombing the Taliban. He means not bombing the Taliban, And again, I just think it's a bunch of crap that there's a bunch of Al-Qaeda guys in Afghanistan to attack. So, And if it comes to ISIS, I think the Taliban have all the incentive in the world they need to completely crush those guys right out of existence and take their place. And ISIS was only ever very small in Nangarhar province and a little bit down in Helmand, and then that's about it. They're certainly gone from Helmand, and I don't know if anything left of them exists in any real form in Nangarhar other than just small networks of men. So honestly, I think they could probably just turn their back on the place. On the other hand, you know what? Hakan Sada might come back to Kabul, to Afghanistan, and go to Kabul and invite Ayman al-Zawahiri to be his national security advisor. Yeah, I don't know.
Right.
If that happens, then yes, expect the entire Special Operations Command to go back to Kabul and kill people.
Scott, so one thing about Afghanistan and Joe Biden is Biden actually seems to understand Afghanistan a little bit. And so I could definitely see Joe Biden, unlike what Donald Trump or probably Kamala Harris could do, if somebody comes to them and say, we got to bomb these Haqqani guys, he could be like, even mushy brain Joe Biden knows that Haqqani doesn't equal Al-Qaeda. But right. I don't think Kamala Harris knows the difference. And so it may just depend on how long Biden is even in office, because it sure seems like she could be baited more. I guess the other issue is that Biden has always wanted to wage like a CIA covert war in Afghanistan. And the other thing is even though and can explain that the whole China thing is stupid, that doesn't mean the U.S. national security state does. And so I could definitely see the CIA having a real advantage or a real desire to just basically keep screwing things up in Afghanistan, training enough militants to make sure the Taliban have to constantly be at war. And if the Taliban are at war, then you could portray them as committing war crimes and, just sanction the Afghan, state with the Taliban or something like that. And, fit it into the great power pivot to Asia, new national security strategy they're really moving towards. I guess that's like kind of more my concern going forward, even more so than the Taliban, or at least the Al-Qaeda guys, at least until Joe Biden's no longer president.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think I agree. The biggest danger is not the war on terrorism, continuing on in Afghanistan. It's the war for terrorism there. And, some kind of deal with the devil to help the Taliban support the ETIM against the Chinese, something like that. That's the thing that concerns me the most. And it'd be stupid and hubristic and horrible enough, especially now after all of this, that I could see the Democrats trying it and the CIA.
Yeah. Well, Scott, thanks so much for coming back on the show. There's been so many great articles on Afghanistan at antiwar.com. I wish I could have, asked you about more of that. Like Ray McGovern's article on holding the generals accountable this time is one of the most important things I think we have to do at this point is, Stanley McChrystal, the great failure of Afghanistan, who got fired because he was doing such a poor job and acting like an idiot, gets millions of dollars for running Missouri's COVID rollout. He got millions. The McChrystal group made millions of dollars off of that state for doing, and it's one of the worst states for distributing the unemployment. They gave raw money to 58,000 people, a whole bunch of poor people who probably spent all the money, then they asked for it back, kind of stuff, just ruining people's lives that way, making them debt slaves to the government. And So, anyways, Scott, you say whatever you want about any of the HOTS or anything else you got going on, and tell people where to find your work.
Man, I didn't know anything about that. You should write an article about that.
Oh, I'll do a little bit of digging and at least put together a little blog post for it.
Yeah, man, something. That's really something. What a scumbag and bad general that guy is. Anyway, listen, everybody, check out Kyle at the Libertarian Institute, as well as all the other great places that you hear this show and see this show. He's our news editor there, and I'm very proud to have him, libertarianinstitute.org. And, of course, he is the opinion editor at antiwar.com, along with being the host of this great show, usually with the great Will Porter as well. So I'm really proud to have you on board on the team at the Institute and at antiwar.com, Kyle. Very happy to come on your show anytime. And people want to know about the war in Afghanistan. pretty sure I can stand by every take I make in Fool's Errand, except there's one paragraph that I think I've corrected previously about some Marines killing people near Jalalabad. That was in the WikiLeaks, and I got that one wrong, and those guys were exonerated, credibly exonerated for that. So there's one bad paragraph in the book, but it doesn't change the narrative whatsoever. And as far as who's who and who's got the momentum and what it's going to look like when it all comes apart and the reasons why and all of that, I think it's all in there and sound. So people want to check that out, I guess.
All right, Scott, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you, Kyle. Appreciate it, bud.